And, I tell everybody, don't be afraid to ask anybody for anything, because the worst they can do is no.
Let's go.
Hey everybody in the Zeigler Auto Group, welcome to another episode of the Future of ZAG Today podcast. I'm your host, Sam Dark, along with me co-host Mike Van Ryn. Mike, how are you doing this morning?
I'm excellent, Sam. Great to spend time with you today.
Hey everybody in the Zeigler Auto Group and friends of the Drive for Life charity event, welcome to this special edition of the Future of ZAG Today podcast. I'm your host, Sam Dark, and along with me today, Zeigler-sponsored NASCAR driver Josh Bilicki. In less than a month, on September 13th, 2021, much of the Zeigler Auto Group, along with you, our vendors, partners, and friends, will join together in Kalamazoo, Michigan, as the ZAG has done 39 times before, to celebrate, to learn, and most importantly, to give to multiple charities. If you don't have a ticket yet, contact the Zeigler Auto Group today for your $250 raffle and event entry. Joining us at Drive for Life will be NASCAR driver Josh Bilicki. Josh drove car 52, sponsored by the ZAG, in Sunday's Firekeepers Casino 400 in Brooklyn, Michigan. Today, we sit down with Josh for this special Drive for Life edition of the podcast. His interview was a blast and definitely runs on the longer side for us here at the ZAG. Review the show notes and time codes to skip to certain interview points, like, for example, hearing how he started practicing NASCAR racing on iRacing and watching YouTube videos, his experience racing with Dale Earnhard Jr., racing Mazda Miatas, how he lost on his first race, brakes at 175 miles an hour, how he went NASCAR racing simply because he sent the team a Facebook request asking if he could be the driver. And oh yeah, Josh challenges ZAG president and CEO Aaron Zeigler to a race at Chicago Autobahn's Country Club. I think you'll agree there's much about business, leadership, and definitely NASCAR racing to learn from this interview with Zeigler-sponsored NASCAR driver Josh Bilicki. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Future of ZAG Today, Josh Bilicki.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Zeigler Auto Group, Zeigler Motorsports, for coming on board. I'm really excited for this weekend.
Man, so are we. Not only do we get to do a meet and greet with you at Motorsports, by the time this airs, that will have happened, but also many from our team get to come watch you race live here in Michigan. And it's exciting to have someone from our footprint who's from Wisconsin, where we have new stores, racing here in the state of Michigan. So, Josh, we're excited to get to know you a little bit. Tell us, how did the relationship come to be between Zeigler and you and your racing team, Josh?
It actually stemmed through another sponsor of mine, Jim Marriott. I actually worked for Jim Marriott at his drywall yard for, I think, 7 or 8 years. Actually, probably longer than that. I started working there just sweeping the floor, and he has always been a very loyal supporter of mine. He helped me make my first professional start in sports car racing, because that's my background. My background is sports car racing. Jim Marriott stepped up, helped me make that first start. He helped me make my first NASCAR start at Road America in 2016. And he actually made the introduction to Aaron Zeigler. Actually, Jim Marriott buys all of his fleet from Aaron Zeigler. So it was a pretty cool connection there. Thank you to Jim Marriott if this reaches you. Jim's done so much for me, but also thank you to Aaron too, because obviously Aaron needed to step in and say, let's do this. So it's exciting to, have two sponsors that work together like that. And I'm just excited for this weekend.
We're excited to see you, and we're going to come in a moment to what your goals are for this weekend as you enter into this race in Michigan coming up. But would you share a little bit of your story? I got onto Wikipedia and I saw a little bit of your history and how you got into racing. What are the beginnings of your becoming a NASCAR race car driver? And when did you know it was something you wanted to do and become?
Yeah, so for me growing up, my career set was always road course racing. Tracks like Road America, which is in my background, tracks you turn left and right on. Like, you watch Formula One and they're on road courses. So growing up, I started racing go-karts when I was 4 on road courses, and that was always my mindset, to go race road courses. I never really had a big interest in NASCAR racing or oval racing, aside from the couple of road courses they raced. And I always just kind of struggled to put together sponsorship deals, when I was at the level to where I could go pro racing. Like I said, Jim Marriott stepped up and he was very gracious to help me make that first pro start. But after that, it was just really hard to find sponsorship to go pro racing on sports car side. So I actually had the opportunity to go NASCAR racing in 2016, which is crazy as it sounds. It started with a Facebook message.
Wow.
In 2016, I looked at the entry list for the local race here in Wisconsin at Road America, the NASCAR race, And one of those teams had both of their cars listed as to be announced. And this is the Wednesday before the race. So the race was on Saturday. There's 3 days before the race and they have to be announced. So I thought, what the heck, I'm just going to go on Facebook, find this team, message them, and little did I know they needed a driver. At the time, I had thousands of laps around Road America. It's pretty common for some of these NASCAR teams to bring in road course ringers, they're called, at some of these road courses. So they brought me on. Like I said, I had to come up with a little bit of sponsorship. Thankful for Jim Marriott for that again. And that was the start of my NASCAR career.
Is that unusual, Josh? That's got to be unusual, answering a Facebook message and getting in to race your first NASCAR race.
It is. I mean, it all happened so quickly. There's an approval process too. And the sports car series that I raced is IMSA. IMSA is actually owned by NASCAR. So that definitely helped expedite the process. But I mean, it was literally such a quick process of getting approved, finding the sponsorship, making sure I'm locked in the car, making sure I fit in the car. Before you know it, Friday rolls around and it's time to practice. So it was such a unique, crazy story. And, I tell everybody, don't be afraid to ask anybody for anything, because the worst they can do is no. The worst the team could have came back and said was, we have a driver. But, I took that gamble and it paid off. So,
Josh, that's such an important message for us at the Zeigler Auto Group and in the car business, because in business, so often, if you don't ask, you don't get the answer. And yet so often, sometimes we're timid to actually make the ask. Have you ever thought about how different your life would be had you not done that? How would it be different today had you not done that?
Honestly, I don't know if I'd have made that first NASCAR start. That race being at a road course, that interested me. And after that race, my whole career kind of went from road course racing to let's try NASCAR out. There's a lot more opportunity for the sponsors involved. NASCAR is such a huge industry, whereas sports car racing is a lot smaller. And the fan base too. In NASCAR, the fan base in NASCAR compared to sports car racing, it's like 10 times what sports car racing is. So there's more opportunity for sponsors to just go in front of the eyeball of the fans and the viewers, but also there's more opportunity for the sponsors to connect with other sponsors in the sport. And having a background like mine, where I came from, a middle-class family where we couldn't really fund our pro racing efforts because it cost so much money, I knew that if I want to make it in the sport, I need to have a background in business and have value for my sponsors. I just saw a lot more value in NASCAR than sports car racing. So had I not sent that first message on Facebook, I honestly don't know where I'd be right now. Maybe I'd be in the drywall industry, or maybe I'd be in the car industry, salesman. I don't know, to be honest.
What a great story. I love that. So Josh, I found a quote from you, and it may have been right after you started NASCAR racing, and I want to get your take on this. You said, I've really got no stock car experience other than Phoenix, Miami, and Michigan this weekend. However, I use a lot of, do you remember what you said? To prep myself, iracing. And you're like, I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Now, Josh, I got to tell you, you're going to give a lot of people hope that they could possibly drive one day if iracing and YouTube videos can help make you a better driver. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm going to turn the camera right here. There's a cardboard cutout of me, but here's my iracing.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, for those in the podcast audience, because we don't have video in this, in the corner of Josh's room, there is an elaborate, almost virtual car setup with screens and all the displays.
Yeah, I mean, my first real oval race was in NASCAR. And, going back to your point before, it's so unique that I come from a road course background, racing on road courses, and then I go the oval route, and my first circle track basically ever is in NASCAR. By the time most of these drivers that are making their debuts in NASCAR make their debut on an oval, they have thousands of races on short tracks, quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile tracks across the country, super late models. And I didn't have that. So it was a huge, huge learning curve for me. And that's why I really relied on iRacing. iRacing is a software, it's computer based. They laser scan every single track. They laser scan every single car. So basically you have the pedals. It's not a controller. You have pedals, steering wheel, shifter. You sit just like you're sitting in a car, and you have all the sensation, in the steering wheel, in the pedals that you do in a real car. I mean, you feel the bumps. You feel when the car is getting loose. The one thing you don't have is that butt feeling. Like when you're driving a car, you feel obviously the G-forces and the load. You don't have that on my simulator rig, but you can pick up a lot of braking points, reference points on the track, turning points. Combining that with watching YouTube videos, that helped me prepare for my first NASCAR start on an oval, which was at Phoenix in 2016. So I relied heavily on those two things, and it's pretty cool too. I mean, it's so cool to get on iRacing and play with fans, but also like heroes of mine. Like I'll get on, and every now and then I'll see Dale Earnhardt Jr. online. I'll race with him. I mean, we'll race until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's, not only is it cool for me, but, the race fan too. It's cool for them to be on a platform like iRacing.
Dale Earnhard Jr. and you racing on iRacing. Tell us how that goes.
So last year during COVID break, we had 2 months where we didn't race at all in real life. So myself and a lot of other drivers in NASCAR race on iRacing all the time. I mean, it felt like there were 3 or 4 nights that we stayed up to like 2 or 3 in the morning. And there was one race where it was me, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Martin Truex Jr. There were like 4 or 5 top NASCAR drivers. And then me, who's not a top NASCAR driver yet. A lot of other people in the industry racing. We were racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the oval in old Indy cars. And it was really cool. And it was an awesome race. And I think I either finished second or first. But Martin Truex Jr. and I raced hard the entire race. Dale Earnhardt Jr., he blew up his engine because, I mean, there's damage. You get damage. So he blew up his engine way early in the race. So he was out. But, I mean, it was awesome. And that's what's cool about iRacing. It puts everybody in the same playing field. Whereas, like, when I race in real life, and I know we haven't gotten to this point yet, but when I race in real life, I drive for a very small team. You know, we're using cars that are outdated, 3 or 4 years old. Whereas big teams have these huge budgets. They have brand new cars every single track. When you play on iRacing, you're in the same exact car as your competitor. So if it's Dale Earnhardt Jr., if it's Martin Truex Jr., who, on Sundays, you see them towards the front. It's cool to be able to race with them on iRacing.
You're on iRacing. You're racing Dale Earnhardt Jr. Is the pit maneuver ever a thing in virtual racing, or do you guys keep it clean?
Not for me, because I'm afraid I won't get invited back to race with him. But I can tell you that we've definitely wrecked our share of drivers. Just I don't think I would wreck Dale Earnhardt Jr. For one. Like I said, I don't think I would get invited back to race in his lobby. But for two, I want to show these guys that I race.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what. What a cool lesson for us in the business world, that how you practice has so much to do with how you actually race. We had Ben Wallace, NBA Hall of Famer, on this podcast last week, and he said his practices were 10 times harder than the actual games. And it sounds like through using technology, you found a way to game the practice so that you can get in as many hours as you possibly can. I love that, right?
Yeah. So, and even this year, with COVID still in the picture, NASCAR has cut most practice and qualifying from each race weekend. So we have 38 races this year. 30 of them have no practice or qualifying. You just show up and race. We haven't been to Michigan in over a year. Last time we were at Michigan was in August. So on Sunday, we're basically showing up with the setup notes that we have from last year. We're just going out there, doing our 2 or 3 pace laps, at 60, 70 miles per hour. And then they're unleashing us at one of the fastest tracks we go to at 190 miles per hour. So with no practice in real life, NASCAR doesn't allow us to practice at these tracks prior to the race. Like, we can't come and test at this track. It needs to be a NASCAR sanctioned test, which there aren't very many at all, to keep the cost down. Drivers like myself use iRacing. And like I said, I used it back then to learn these tracks, even when we had practice. Now we don't have practice, and I'm still heavily relying on that. So some of the big drivers like Martin Truex Jr., like Kyle Busch, they have huge, huge manufacturer simulators that the manufacturer simulators are owned by Toyota, Chevy, and Ford. I mean, these are $100 million machines that have basically a car on this huge axis that move around. It's definitely really cool. Unfortunately, I don't get to use that. So like I said, I rely on iRacing.
Well, I'll tell you, I watched some of your YouTube videos of you racing last night, and it is just a blast to watch. I saw a little bit of the iRacing, and then I also saw some of you just doing the track. One video people should check out on your YouTube page is you racing a Ferrari with a little kid who couldn't have looked happier. So you started out racing go-karts and shifter karts, it looks like. What was your first NASCAR start? How did you do? And what was it like being on that big track for the first time?
Yeah. So like you said, I started racing go-karts, race karts all the way up until 15. Then I started racing a Mazda Miata.
Tell us about that, because I've driven a Miata before, right? And it's the fun 4-cylinder car that, it's just fun to putt around the neighborhood in. I never thought of a Miata on a racetrack. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So when I was just basically getting from the transition from karts to cars, my dad and I kind of evaluated our options. We could have gone the stock car route and gone to race at little short tracks, circle tracks around the country, but we wanted to stay in road courses because that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a professional road course driver. So we looked at this class in the Sports Car Club of America, the SCCA, called Spec Miata. And basically they were older generation Mazda Miatas. I think the Miata was built the first year in like 1988, and then all the way up until I think like late 2007 or 8. Then it transitioned to the MX-5. So the Miatas were the older generation, MX-5s are the new generation. So Spec Miata class was basically all these Miatas with the spec engine racing on the same track. So basically all these cars are very identically prepped. Each individual owns that car, but it's very low horsepower racing, very close racing. And there were weekends where we would have had 70 or 80 drivers on a track like Road America, which is a 4 mile track. So no matter where you were racing, if you were racing for 20th, if you were racing for 40th or 60th, wherever you were, it was super competitive. And oftentimes there were professional drivers coming to race these races just for extra seat time. So we started racing that, I think, in 2011 or 2012. Honestly, I learned so much racing Mazda Miatas. Your mind would be blown if you found out how much money people still dumped into these Mazda Miatas. I mean, there's only so much you can do to the car. And they still only cranked out 130 horsepower because the engine needed to be within spec. But people would find ways just to put $100,000 into Mazda Miata.
Because it'd give them that edge, right? It'd give them a little bit of an edge or a perceived edge.
You could take 10 engines that have the same parts on them, and you'd have 3 engines that may make 2 or 3 more horsepower. It's just the nature of, little tiny differences, different manifolds, intakes make an extra horsepower or 2. And that extra horsepower, when you're only dealing with 125 horsepower, 130 horsepower, makes a difference. So it was an awesome experience to race those Mazda Miatas. Through racing Miatas, all around the country, we were introduced to, just new connections and sponsors. And that's kind of what helped me take the next step in my racing career and make my first pro start in sports cars in 2015. And I had only ran two pro sports car races in 2015. 2016, I only ran a handful again. And then in 2016 is when I Facebook messaged the NASCAR team and said, if you guys need a driver, I'm very local. I can come up with a couple sets of tires for sponsorship dollars. So that was my first NASCAR start. And that was 2016 at Road America. So we actually didn't finish the race. It was very, very, very unfortunate.
What happened?
The whole weekend was, I don't want to say a disaster because it was an awesome experience for me. But as far as results on track, it was a disaster. In practice, we lost brakes going into turn 1 at 175 miles per hour. Lost brakes. We were using basically circle track brakes. And there's a huge difference from the big teams in NASCAR that spend, the $10, $20 million in the Xfinity Series to the small teams that use the parts that aren't correct for the tracks.
Josh, what do you do when you lose brakes at 160 miles an hour?
Fortunately for me, Road America is one of the safest tracks in the country. They have a lot of sand and gravel on the exit of turn 1. So if a driver does lose brakes, that gravel slows them down. So what happened was we had the wrong brakes on the car. They were basically brakes that you use in a 1.5 mile circle track. You barely use any brakes in a 1.5 mile circle track. So these brakes weren't equipped to basically handle that heat. And the brake bleeder screw was actually helicoiled because it was stripped. Well, when they got really hot, the helicoil expanded. The front brakes lost almost all their fluid. So I had rear brakes. So the rear brakes locked up. I spun. I hit the sand sideways, and it slowed the car down. So luckily, I don't know how I didn't hit the wall. But if you guys are watching this, you can go on YouTube and type in Josh Bilicki crash Road America, because unfortunately, I've lost brakes a couple times there. So you can watch a couple videos there. But like I said, so luckily I didn't hit the wall. We got the car back together for qualifying. We qualified, I think, 23rd, which for that small team out of, I think there were 42 or 43 cars, that was their best result in qualifying ever for the 2 or 3 years they were around. So they were extremely happy about that. We started the race, and within like 5 laps, the car just kind of started losing power. Turns out that the alternator wire was not plugged in. As silly as that sounds, it sounds like a rookie amateur mistake. It wasn't plugged in. We drained the battery, and the team didn't have a great reputation, so nobody would lend us a spare battery. We didn't have a spare battery, and that was the end of that race. So from that, the team owner actually said, you did a great job. We want to put you back in the car. So that's when he gave me the opportunity to race twice later that year, once at Phoenix, which was an oval, and then once at Miami, which Phoenix is a 1 mile circle track. Miami is a 1.5 mile circle track. It doesn't sound like half mile is a big difference, but on a racetrack, it's a huge difference. Like Michigan's a 2 mile track we're racing this weekend, and that's a big, long track where you're almost wide open all the entire track. But going from Phoenix to Miami, it was such a huge learning experience for me. We did finish both those races. I don't remember where we finished. I think like 28th in Phoenix, which again, for a very small team, my first circle track race, that was a good day for us. So yeah, that was my introduction to NASCAR. But just being there and seeing all of the potentials for sponsors that I had, potential sponsors that I'm working on, seeing all the connections that were there, that's really what made me make that change from, I want to go sports car racing to let's go NASCAR racing. Because I'm a racer, and I don't care what I'm racing, as long as I'm racing something. And, like I said earlier, when I was young, I didn't really have any drive to go NASCAR racing. But now that I've done it, a lot of people look at NASCAR racing and say, you're just racing on ovals. It's boring. It's easy. It's not. Racing on an oval, honestly, when you're on the edge of the limit of the car, is more challenging, in my opinion, than racing on a road course. They're both challenging in their own ways. But racing in ovals, I mean, it is very challenging. You're always on the edge of the car. If you go beyond that edge, there is no gravel. There is nothing there other than the wall. So, you need to make sure that you find that limit and then take one tiny step back. Yeah, so that was the introduction to NASCAR for me.
So have you ever gone beyond the limit to unfortunate consequences? As I look at your race results, I don't see it, but you ever ended up in the wall or crashed upside down or anything?
I've never been upside down yet. I've had a couple back crashes. None were really my doing, though. My worst crash was in Texas in 2018 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which is the Saturday series. In practice, I blew a right front tire at I think 180 or 190 miles per hour. And Texas is one of the fastest tracks we go to. It's a 1.5 mile track, so it's not the longest, but the banking there in turns 3 and 4 is really, really high. And the load on the car is really, really high. And we blew a right front tire right in the center of turns 3 and 4. And basically, I shot up straight to the wall. I didn't have time to let go of the steering wheel. And when the tire hit the wall, I mean, the tire basically ripped the steering wheel out of my hand and it broke my hand. So that was the worst I had. I mean, it was painful, but it wasn't like bones coming out of my hand painful. So I honestly didn't even want to go to the doctor. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to go to the doctor because we had 2 races yet that year. So
whoa, wait! You raced after with a broken arm or hand?
Broken hand. Yeah, but I did. As soon as the season was over, I think we had 2 more races left after that. I went to the doctor and I got a cast, and it delayed my snowmobile season for a little bit, which I was a little bit upset about. But like I said, I didn't want to have to miss the last 2 races for myself, but also for my sponsors.
How do you find that line, that thin line that you talk about where you're high performance, you're performing at your best, you're competing, and then that line between disaster? Where is that line? How do you get there? And how do you train yourself mentally to push that line?
Yeah, so it is tough without practice. Especially, it's very tough in my scenario driving for a small team because when we wreck a car, it takes a lot out of our budgets. It takes a lot out of our our crew and the work they have to do at the shop. Whereas some of the big teams who have these $40 or $50 million per car budgets, if they wreck a car, they have a car waiting to go already at the shop. So I always keep that in mind, especially on a race weekend where we might need to race the same car next weekend. You can get close to that line and you can kind of start feeling the car get away from you. Whether it's the rear of the car, whether it's the front of the car, you can get close to that. And that's when the car is the fastest, when you're very, very close to that. But in my scenario, in my case, I'm for a small team, you don't always want to be close to that line. Like the big teams and some of the big drivers, if you watch their onboard footage, you'll see them always fighting the wheel. That's because they are so close to that line. And oftentimes, not oftentimes, but sometimes they do wreck. And, they wreck more than I do because they are so close to that line, but they're paid to do that because they drive for a big team. They can afford to do that. If they make one mistake out of every 10 or 20 races, that's okay. Whereas us, we don't want to have to make that mistake.
You try to have that mistake in the simulator in a controlled environment, right?
Exactly. So like I said, we really try not to get to that point. And it's just something about experience. The more experience you have at these tracks, which I don't have as much experience as a lot of these guys do because, I'm fairly new in this sport. But I do feel like I've done a very good job at finding that line and then taking that one step back. But not enough to where I'm not competitive. Because obviously if you take too big of a step back, then you're going to be, that second off pace, and you don't want to do that.
Well, and you've had some great finishes so far, right? Looking at your results, which I don't have in front of me, Indianapolis, that's your biggest points earning this year, right? It was Indianapolis. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're just coming off Indianapolis. That was a road course. So we ran, I don't know if you guys are Formula One fans, but we ran the old Formula One track that I think they raced there early 2000s. So that was really cool. Usually that's ran on the oval. So that was the first year NASCAR, the Cup Series, went to the road course. And it was a pretty attrition-filled race. I mean, there were a lot of wrecks, but we honestly just kept our car. Well, we tried to keep it clean. I got
you did?
Twice. I got put in the tire wall. Our car was used up there at the end, but some cars were just destroyed. So I think like 28 or 29 cars finished, but we did have good speed. Being a road course, you can often drive beyond what the car's potentials are on a road course. Whereas on an oval, the car kind of dictates where you finish. On a road course, the driver can have a little bit more input. So having a road course background, being that track was a road course, we had a great day. And an 18th place finish, we, like I said, we finished ahead of the team that spent 7 or 8 times their budget. Awesome. So that was a huge points day for us. It was a huge payout for us. I hate that we kind of our car was, like I said, it was destroyed. It was still driving, but the steering wheel was 35 degrees offset. It was not easy to drive at all, but We finished.
What do you say to the mechanics and the team when you bring that car back worn out, right? Like, do you have to, do you buy lunch? Do you buy them a beer? What do you do to say, sorry, I wrecked your car and let's get it going?
It's one thing if I would have wrecked the car. First of all, none of the wrecks were my fault. I got spun from behind twice, actually. But I think that the saving grace for that was the fact that that was the team's best finish ever on a non-super speedway track. So, like, other than Daytona and Talladega, that was their best finish. So they were just beyond happy that we finished there. Now if we would have gotten wrecked like that and then maybe not finished the race or then finished 31st or 32nd, they would have said, what are you doing? Taking these risks when, you're running for 30th. But we had a shot at a top 20, which we did get. So they were happy about it. The team owner was happy about it. And our next road course isn't until October 10th too. So we got about 2 months now. So they got some time. That our next road course is at Charlotte Motor Speedway. It's actually the Roval. So it's inside of the oval track that we race at, the Coke 600. But instead of running the full oval, we run the road course on the inside as well.
That's awesome. So look, you have a family, right? I've read about your dad and how he drove you around in the early days, and you'd spend a lot of time preparing for the races. What does your family and loved ones think of your career choice in NASCAR racing and some of the dangers that line brings to your personal well-being and health? How do they view that?
I think my mom's the only one that really gets worried about the danger part of it. These cars are so safe, but at the same time, when you're going 200 miles per hour around a track like Daytona or Talladega, where you're in a pack, you saw some nasty wrecks in the last couple of years. The most famous one, I think, was Ryan Newman's wreck last year in 2020 at the Daytona 500, where we were unsure if he was going to make it or not, So, these cars are so safe, but to an extent, these cars are much safer than the cars driving on the streets. So I think my mom worries a little bit more than she needs to. I mean, that's a mom, right? My dad is just, I don't think he cares, but
he's having a good time. Does your mom watch you live? Does she come to the race?
She doesn't come to every race. Neither does my dad, just because the schedule is so intense. They've come to multiple races. My dad's come to more races these last couple of weeks, actually, just because they've been kind of local. But yeah, they watch every single race, whether it's on TV, they're listening to the scanner. You guys can have the NASCAR scanner app open and listen to our radio communication. Wow. So they know what's going on before they even see it on TV. So
for the Zeigler Auto Group folks that are listening to this, where do you get that scanner app and how do we get onto your stream, Josh?
Yeah, so that's actually just the NASCAR app. You download the NASCAR app, and then during the race, there's going to be a little live button on the bottom of that app. You press that, and then it's going to take you to a list of who's running where in the positions. And then you basically just scroll down to my name, click my name, and then it'll say listen to audio. Then you can listen to my audio. So you can listen to my communications with my crew chief. You can listen to my spotter, what he says to me. My spotter's going to be the one talking the most, telling me who's behind me, because you can't see really anything out of these cars. You have the big headrest, almost like it's a full containment seat, so you can't move your head. So the spotter's going to be the one talking the most. I'm going to be the one talking second, and my crew chief's going to be on. So it's going to be us three. So it is pretty cool. If you guys have never listened to, the communications behind like a NASCAR race team, it is really cool to listen to.
We're going to log in and listen to it. So, hey, one of the things we're always interested as part of the podcast being business affiliated is how people overcome adversity. So certainly you've come on a moment where you've had massive adversity, or maybe you've been discouraged even in your career or hopes to become a world-class racer. Tell us a little bit about that situation and how you overcame challenge in that situation.
Yeah, and I think in this sport, there's multiple different ways of diversity and coming over that. And I think the biggest thing in this sport is, even if you're the most talented driver, it's tough to make it far without sponsorship and budget. And like I said, I don't come from a very wealthy family, so we have never been able to, put our own dollars into racing, meaning I need to go race on someone else's dollar, whether it's sponsors, whether it's partners, whether it's just gentlemen who like racing. And I think that's definitely the toughest part about the sport. I work behind the scenes, 70, 80 hours behind the scenes a week just to, maintain the sponsorship deals I have with my partners, hopefully build those relationships, connect my sponsors with new sponsors and other sponsors involved in the industry, everything behind the scenes. I mean, even as far as like designing the cars, I think that's the toughest part. This is my first full time in the Cup Series season, and I'm very thankful to be here. But I've been in the past, wouldn't race in a month, 2 months.
That's tough.
That's when that starts getting frustrating. You start looking down on yourself because you're saying, well, I'm not out there. I want to be out there. And I think the easiest thing is just, it's not easy, but, working hard. I think having a hard work ethic and just telling yourself you can do this goes really far. And my motto's always been dream big, work hard.
Do you think it's an advantage to you to have that, let's call it a weakness, right? So there's some people that have all the money, all the resources, and yet they don't succeed, right? There's something about somebody that has to hustle for those resources that a lot of times makes them more successful. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I honestly agree with that. And I think it's because we have to grind and work so hard. We want it so badly. We're not handed everything to us. So we have to work so hard to get to where we are. And people look, and I still get people that don't understand my situation, and people think that, oh, he's just a 30th or 35th place driver. Well, that's not the case. So, that makes me even more hungry to where next year, either I want to take, more sponsorship dollars and help elevate my team, or I want to move to a more competitive team. That drives me when people say, he's just a 35th place driver. Hopefully next year we're a 25th or 20th place driver. And in this sport, the equipment you're in dictates where you're going to finish. You could put Kyle Busch in the car I'm racing, and on a good day with no crashes, he's probably only going to finish 30th, where I might be 31st. Kyle Busch has a lot of experience in the sport, so that might be that position right there. But it's such a crazy sport where the equipment you're in dictates where you finish. That drives me when people say he's just a 30th, 35th place driver, and hopefully I can use that as fuel to create new partnership deals.
Josh, that drive, I think, is a common feature of people who are successful, whether in the car business, whether, again, going back to Ben Wallace in the NBA being, undrafted, first undrafted person in the Hall of Fame, being told you can't his entire career. And that drove him. And I see that same drive in you. So that is awesome. Do you have something funny that's happened to you in your racing career that you don't mind sharing with the Zeigler Auto Group team, or an incident in the pit or elsewhere in racing that might surprise us?
I think the craziest moment that I've had in NASCAR was actually at my first race. I told you that we had lost brakes.
Yeah, you can't lose your brakes in a race car.
We can't. So I lost brakes, and it wasn't really my doing. Nobody had gave me the talk saying these aren't the correct brakes. Don't go out there and push 100%. And it was only like 3 or 4 laps too, so the brakes shouldn't have got that happened. So anyways, that happened in practice. And basically, after that happened in practice, my dad and I went back to the trailer. And the team told us, we're done for practice. We're happy with your speed. Let's just make sure the car is 100% ready to go for qualifying. So my dad and I are like, all right, we're going to go ride around our mopeds and watch the rest of practice. So we're on the mopeds watching the rest of practice. And this is something for me I'm trying to utilize as a tool so I can see other drivers and what they're doing on the track. And all of a sudden I see my car, the 77 white Camaro, drive on the track, like real slow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they just took me out of the seat. Like, they kicked me out of the seat. They must be mad that I made a mistake. And I'm freaking out. And I go back up there, and it turns out it's my teammate. My teammate was a girl. She crashed her car lap 1 of practice. She just made a rookie mistake of her own. She crashed first lap. She needed to make like 1 or 2 laps so NASCAR would let her qualify. So she drives by, but I freaked out. That was the weirdest, most comical moment now, I think, in my career. I feel like I have a lot of funny moments. Some of them I probably can't say. Some of them we just had to be there. But that was a moment where I'm like,
and that just shows the chip on your shoulder too, which I love. And probably part of your drive is like, I'm not going to get thrown out of my seat. And was I thrown out of my seat, right? So that is awesome. Yeah. So, hey, look, you've talked a lot about Talladega, and you can't talk about the Talladega race course without, for the general public, acknowledging a great film in the history of NASCAR racing, Talladega Nights. Any comment on Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, and or what that movie did or did not do for NASCAR racing?
Yeah, it's an interesting movie for sure.
You like it? Is it one you like?
I love it. I love those two together, honestly. But so many people ask me, is that really how NASCAR is? And that's one thing that bothers me. Like, that
can't be a real question. Is it a real question? I'm going to erase that off my next question here. I'm not going to ask that.
Honestly, it is. People ask me all the time, do you really downshift to pass a car? And you don't do those things. But I think for the sport, it was good because it brought eyeballs to us. I still watch that movie. I probably still watch a movie 10 times a year, whether it's just on TV or whatever. But I think a movie that was really good, which isn't comical. Most people probably haven't seen it. Days of Thunder, yes.
What do you like about that movie? Did that inspire you in your pursuit to become a driver?
To be honest, I haven't seen that movie. I hadn't seen that up until probably 5 or 6 years ago. I just never really had an interest in it. Now I look back and I watch it. That I think that was probably NASCAR's golden era. Obviously the sport's changing. All sports are changing. I think NASCAR hit its peak and had its golden era in the late 80s, early 90s, even up until like early 2000 when Dale Earnhardt Jr. died. I really like that movie because it brings back that golden era to where I wasn't there. I couldn't experience it. That's a little bit more of a realistic movie, unlike Talladega Nights. But I just love Talladega Nights because it features Yeah, features two of the best actors, and it's based around NASCAR.
Well, actually, maybe even three of the best actors. Do you know the French race car driver goes on to become Borat, right? Isn't that Borat?
Yeah.
So there's some lesser known actors who end up becoming a little bit more mainstream. It's interesting. One of your posts I saw on your YouTube page talked about how you were raising awareness for three charities on a recent race: Pets for Patriots, Vitamin Angels, and I think Patriot Education Fund. It might have been part of a sponsorship you had with Prevagen. Are there any charities or sponsorships that you value, charities that you really feel passionate about and believe in?
Yeah, I can think of two right now that I still continue to work with. One is Lemons of Love. Lemons of Love is a local company here in actually Wisconsin. They create chemo care packages for people going through chemotherapy. And they're very well connected in the racing industry. I love to do all I can. I mean, cancer is such a tragic illness. So I just love to work with them. And another one is the Wounded Blue. The Wounded Blue basically supports wounded police officers. And right now, with everything going on in the country, I'm very strong behind that as well. So those two, Lemons of Love and the Wounded Blue, I try to work very closely with. But yeah, those three that you mentioned were part of a 2018 full season sponsorship with a company called Prevagen. Prevagen was a memory loss pill. Again, Prevagen found me through, basically, I was on the radio station in 2017, said I need a sponsor for one race. The CEO of the company that makes Prevagen, because Prevagen is a pill, and their parent company is Quincy Bioscience here in Wisconsin. The CEO of that company heard me talking on the radio saying I need a sponsor, went to Facebook, messaged me on Facebook, and that stemmed to a handful of races in 2017, which led to a full season in 2018 in the Saturday in the Xfinity Series. So that was cool. We partnered with several charities, and we actually had them on the car. And it's important for us to do things like that.
So I want to add one charity to your list. So the Zeigler Auto Group, we sponsor for the past 40 years an annual event called Drive for Life, which is only appropriate given your profession, right? And there's two or three charities that primarily benefit: American Cancer Society, MRC Industries, and the charity that specializes in experiences for people who have terminal illness. And it just went from my mind, but I'll remember it. This year, we anticipate raising $750,000 for it. The event is in Kalamazoo, Michigan on September 13th. And we would love, Josh, to invite you not only to attend with us, because it would be great to have you there in person if your schedule permits, but also if you have some sort of an experience or an item that we could raffle off after your race on Monday. And then the charitable dollars or contribution would go to these charities. Make-A-Wish Foundation is the third big charity. We would love to have you join us and be part of the ACS Zeigler Auto Group Drive for Life annual charity event.
I mean, that all kind of comes full circle because I have worked with Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish, like you said, grants wishes for children with illnesses, and I've granted some of those wishes with donated race suits or meet and greets. Actually, before COVID hit, we were trying to plan something with like a ride along, having a race car with a second seat and giving a child a ride along in a real race car. So there's a lot of opportunity for that, but I would absolutely love to. I just looked at my schedule. September 13th, I am open. I believe that's a Monday, so I'll be there.
Awesome. We look forward to having you there. And think about something that we could raffle off. That we could auction off, whether it's a race experience like you described, or whether it's a suit or a helmet or something else. We'd love to have you present there and have some of the monies earned be because of your efforts. Your story is so compelling. So the Zeigler Auto Group, just a couple final questions, is also a member at a place called the Autobahn there. And I believe you have a connection or an affiliation. Maybe describe what your relationship is with.
Yeah. So, going back a couple of years, actually about 7-8 years now, even when I was racing amateur in sports cars in the Miatas, even when I started racing professionally in sports cars, I wasn't getting paid to race. I was spending my own money. So I had to make a living. Aside from working for Marriott Drywall, I offered private coaching and private instructing. So I worked almost 3 times a week at country clubs. So I worked privately as a private coach, basically, coaching gentlemen in race cars and street cars around that racetrack. So Autobahn Country Club is very dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time there. A lot of my clients have garages there. The track is awesome. I mean, I haven't been there, unfortunately, in probably 2 or 3 years, but I want to get back there. And it's awesome to have to know that you guys are there because that's such an awesome facility. And I mean, I've given gentlemen rides in race cars, and after they get out of the race car. They say, I never thought that a car could go that fast around that corner. So it's an awesome experience for people who have never been to a racetrack to get on track. And the Audubon Country Club allows you to do that.
So one of these days, it would be fun to see you and our president and CEO of the Zeigler Auto Group, Aaron Zeigler, race at the Audubon Country Club. So somehow, someday, somewhere, we need to make that happen. Yeah.
100%. I would absolutely love to.
We'd love to see, because Aaron, by the way, just coming out of high school and college, was the #1 jet ski racer in the entire United States of America. And I've seen him race and compete in other sports. He has a competitive spirit that's unrivaled, really, by too many people. So
I had no idea. So that would be awesome. Hopefully he would be mad when I beat him.
No, well, let's see. Let's throw that gauntlet. Let's throw that out there. So, hey, Josh, thank you so much for being on the Future of ZAG today and joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the not only at your race Sunday, and we wish you all the best, but the meet and greet Saturday before, and then also at our Drive for Life charity. We're excited to see what you come up with as far as an item to put in the live auction portion of that event. Hey, want to ask, can we get with you after your race next week and just get a recap of how things went? We'd love to hear the outcome.
Absolutely. 100%. We'll plan on it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Josh. We appreciate your story.
Thank you.
We look forward to having Josh present a unique item or experience at the Drive for Life auction with Ben Wallace on September 13th, 2021 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We're excited to see what he decides to bring to the event. Get your $250 raffle and event ticket today by contacting Beth Calloward at bk@zeigler.com or by reaching out to a Zeigler Auto Group general manager for your ticket. Next week, Views from the ZAG, an interview with Zeigler F&I Director Derek Webb, and more. See you next week on the Future of ZAG Today.